bit. So let me bring in Amanda Rubin, who's the global co-head of brand and content strategy at Goldman Sachs. She has been at the company for over 20 years. So she's been through a lot of ups and downs with brand, but in particular went through that crisis and has been integral in building up the strategy for coming back. Amanda, you there?
I'm here. I'm here.
There you go. Hi, Amanda. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Where are we finding you today?
I'm actually in New York.
Are you at the office?
I am in the office.
Good for you.
So it's probably the safest place to be right now in New York. But yes, I'm in the office. So happy to be here.
Thank you for doing this. I know we have a Goldman Sachs sizzle reel. And by the way, the fact that I'm even saying Goldman Sachs and sizzle reel in the same sentence, I think tells us a lot about the project that you've been doing, and we'll get to that. But before we do, I sort of wanted to set down the ways in which Goldman Sachs itself defined the branding challenge that you faced, say, 12 years ago and since then. How did you define this internally, and how did you come to understand, either through research or your own internal discussions, what in fact the hole was in terms of branding that Goldman Sachs had to dig out of?
Sure. Well, you know, it was interesting. I think, you know, there were forces internal and external, you know, kind of hitting us during the financial crisis. You know, internally, we were experiencing incredible, you know, backlash, if you will, from the politicians as well as the media in terms of coming out of the financial crisis. I think the most important thing for us, though, was recognizing that the general public was really, was almost woke to Goldman Sachs. We had, prior to the financial crisis, existed in what I would call, with an external target audiences, that it was a pretty tight ecosystem, right? We'd always been focused on recruits, and, you know, we had a, you know, very robust B2B business, but we didn't really have a consumer franchise. And there was really no, need to engage with the general public because there was no connective tissue. And what we found in the financial crisis is we became a name in recognized in a very negative way with an audience that we had never actively courted with regards to reputation, favorability. And so I think the financial crisis was this crystallizing moment for us in terms of recognizing that the general public was a key target audience for the firm, and moving forward will, of course, an important audience for us, especially, and we'll get into this as we've launched our consumer business. But I think any big B2B company, and folks have heard me say this before, you know, for the financial services industry, the financial crisis was this crystallizing moment where we recognized that we needed to build our brand in a productive way with the general public, one that didn't really have any type of presence. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of, you know, the awakening, if you will, for our brand building efforts that we've really been focused on for the last 10 to 12 years.
Was it really building from scratch, or were there specific things, say, in terms of research or discussions with consumers that you understood you needed to address?
Well, it was pretty much from scratch, unfortunately, I'm going to have to admit. I think, you know, we had always done research with our core target audiences. So we had research with clients, and we had research with potential recruits, and we had research with investors. And we had started probably 2 or 3 years prior to the financial crisis, researching what we called the influentials. Anyone, you know, any media company understands that's kind of, you know, the segment of the general population. So we basically had what I would say a line in the sand of what they thought of us. Mm-hmm. And so what we were able to see is during the financial crisis, we went, I mean, it went down precipitously. And so we really recognized that we were in trouble, candidly. And so we had research that diagnosed and credentialized the issue of trust and favorability, but we really didn't have an infrastructure built up to court public opinion, because that is a fundamentally different effort than, you know, traditional B2B communications, of which, you know, the team had been very, very focused on. And so I would say for the past decade, the team has been very focused on doing really 3 things. The first was building up an infrastructure that could push out content on an ongoing basis to new audiences, the general public. So paid media, social, our public website, leveraging all of our digital channels, we really kind of built up a more robust infrastructure. We built up a content engine through partnerships with agencies, ultimately growing that effort and that expertise internally. We didn't have that before. And then we built out our research initiative to be able to read our efforts and the effectiveness of those efforts, but also segment even further the general public, what was resonating with different pockets of the general public. So that was the long answer. The short answer is we basically had to build up, I would say 90% of what exists today.
What did, before we get to the reel that sort of walks us through some of the main elements, why was this a content strategy? Why did you decide that really content had to be the core of this effort?
Well, I think that, we weren't selling anything, right? We were trying to court public opinion. We were trying to begin to build relationships with audiences that at that point in time, remember this was pre-Marcus, we weren't actively soliciting them for a commercial opportunity. And so we needed to figure out how is it that we not only got them looking in our direction, but could engage them in a way that was valuable, where they would come back, they would stay with us, they would follow us. And so we were really looking to create what I would call this value exchange. And that exchange either had to manifest itself as explaining what we did through our core businesses and how they were valuable and additive to the broader society. That, that's not a snippet, that's not an ad, that is a longer story, if you will. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to tell. We started with 8 and we realized no one spent that much time with us. We were trying to be valuable in the sense that, we were providing, no matter what you thought of us on a lot of topics, macroeconomic topics, people would be interested in what we had to say. We wanted to talk about some of the things that we did that perhaps others didn't realize we did with regards to helping facilitate the growth of small business, helping empower women entrepreneurs globally. So we were in the business of telling stories that illuminated all the good things that Goldman Sachs did that no one was really interested in, but also hopefully provided some type of value exchange, either imparting some intellectual capital, some type of perspective, some type of understanding of what we did. And those were kind of longer stories that needed to be told. And so digital was the place that we did it. It gave us the opportunity to tell longer stories, more immersive stories. And, content became the raw material, the way in which we told these stories of interest.
So let's take a second and bring in the reel, because this sort of lays out very quickly. So pay attention, everybody, because this moves by quickly. A lot of the elements, and then when we come out on the other end, I want to drill into a few of these elements and how you pulled them off. But let's bring in let's show the video.
Here we go.
that's a lot. And there's a lot in there. There are a couple of things that I really wanted to drill into right away. Now, as long as I've been covering digital, every brand I know has fantasized about having sort of serialized content and using this medium and especially the video tools to make video shows. And it looks like you've got quite a portfolio of them. So I'm really curious about that part. These serialized video video programs and what you've learned about what makes these things work. Are they succeeding? And what have you learned about making them succeed and making them stick so people really want to come back and get attached to them?
Right. So we're very lucky. We have something called GSTV here, which is basically an internal production studio that, you know, we've had the privilege of benefiting from, you know, the physical use of it, if you will. And over the last couple of years, we've actually brought people in who have had journalistic backgrounds to create this, because as I said, you know, we're in the business of storytelling. And, you know, it was organic. You know, we use the word series. We kind of stumbled into that when we started seeing themes and personalities and topics that were generating broader engagement than other things. And so it was a little bit of test and learn. I think we had the advantage of, you know, we were a firm that, you know, was basically, you know, there was an opacity to us. A lot of the opportunity for us was just to invite people in, right? To let people know what's it like to work at Goldman Sachs? What are the senior leaders thinking about? What are the people, you know, talking about? What is physically it look like here? What do some of our client conferences look like? And so we actually benefited from the, candidly being, you know, so veiled in the past,
right.
Opening up the firm in a way that, you know, was very purposeful, was very helpful for us, right? So it was kind of like, you know, we were really, there was the before and after dynamic. And then we found, you know, what was interesting was, you know, topics that people didn't typically associate Goldman Sachs with. So, you know, I'll talk about our Talks at GS program. You know, it's a tremendous program. It's probably the marquee program of the firm with regards to serialized content. And, you know, it originally was created for the people of Goldman Sachs, right? To kind of take advantage of all the incredible minds that come in here across a variety of different topics. You know, we wanted to hear from them, and it was just so interesting and intriguing to the people of Goldman Sachs. We decided, you know, we should open that up. And, you know, it really, for external audiences, demonstrated, you know, the convening power of the firm. And these people are really interesting. Mm-hmm. So that has really been very, very sticky. You know, the stories of, you know, the impact that we're having with regards to, you know, we're an enormous firm. We have an enormous global footprint. How are we contributing to the communities in which we do business? What is the impact that Goldman Sachs has? You know, those stories are very sticky. So when we talk about our efforts on the sustainability front, when we talk about our efforts with our urban investment group, when we talk about our efforts with the small business community, when we talk about our efforts through 10,000 Women and empowering, you know, women entrepreneurs globally, those are stories that are sticky and people engage with us because they're interesting, they're inspiring, they're unexpected. And especially today when all audiences are really interested in what a firm stands for, what is their purpose, how are they contributing. We've seen an uptick in engagement in that type of content. And so
a kind of marketing jujitsu. I mean, you're taking some of the things that had been negatives before, like the mystique around Goldman Sachs, the lack of transparency. The black box actually, to some within B2B, kind of worked in the favor of Goldman Sachs, but then suddenly didn't. You sort of take a lot of those elements, the unexpected, the resources nobody would have expected coming from you, the mystique, and you open it up and flip it. And that actually has some great traction because it's working against expectations.
Right. And it's interesting, you know, we always talk about when we're looking at a new platform or a new content series, it's like, what's the what's the reaction we want? And it's a delicate balance between, oh, they strayed a bit too far, or, oh, wow, really interesting, smart. Oh, of course, Goldman did that. And so that's kind of the pathway that we try and chase, if you will, on all of our external marketing efforts.
The other part there is getting your executives to engage in social. I'm a little curious about how that works. I mean, you're not sending a text to Lloyd and saying, let's up the Twitter posts. How does that actually work internally to engage upper executives, some of whom are very well known,
right,
to be part of the social conversation? Is this something that's very well managed and programmed or not?
Look, I have to say, with regards to Lloyd, that was all him. He joined Twitter. He's a natural on Twitter. He had some really important things to say as the CEO of Goldman Sachs on some important topics that impacted the firm. And, that was just a really authentic opportunity for him. Same as David. David is, very focused on the people of Goldman Sachs, very focused on culture, very focused on, being more approachable and transparent. And so Instagram, has been his platform of choice. And it really allows people, what I was saying earlier, into the firm. What's it like to work here? The different dimensions of people, the types of people who work here are reflected in David's Instagram account. So, I would love to say that's something that, we thought of and engage them to be part of kind of the corporate marketing effort. But, in all fairness, that was, 100% driven by each CEO that we've had the privilege of working with. And we've just been there to kind of help execute. But that's really been their effort, and really important, because social can go south really quickly if you're not using that platform in an authentic way. And we've been really very careful to try and not get on a platform before we could use it in an authentic way, which is why Facebook was, the last platform that we got on.
Why is that?
Because you can't stop comments, right? Like you can't over architect and strong arm the natural narrative that's going to happen on that platform. And we needed to get our stick our toes in the water, needed to get, a couple of platforms underneath our belts, make some mistakes, which we have made, put in the right infrastructure to manage all these social platforms appropriately. We started with LinkedIn. Facebook, our last one was Instagram, I apologize. But, LinkedIn is probably our strongest platform in terms of follower growth. But, there, it seemed a little bit safer for us because people tend to be more professional on LinkedIn. It's, they tend to be who they are. But it's been a journey on how we've built out our social platforms, and it's been very prescriptive in why we have, launched each one at the time we've launched them. And so our senior people on social media has been, I would say, kind of the latest chapter, but it's been driven by them.
So that raises the issue. You said you've learned a lot, you made some mistakes. What are the key course corrections that you made that you think would be instructive to anyone listening in here?
Sure.
Things you didn't see coming.
Yeah. I think that there is a appetite and appreciation for visually things being a bit raw and authentic than overly produced. We've overly produced to an extent. I will tell you, we are still struggling with this. What is the consistent brand experience that when a Goldman Sachs post comes up on social, there's an immediate recognition, whether it is how we treat the logo, what we get in the first, 30, 15, 5 seconds. We don't have a recognizable and an ownable sound yet. Something that we're working on, that others have. So, we're learning as we, move ahead. each platform you need to treat differently in terms of, format, length. So it's not one size fits all. And it continues to evolve. That's one of the challenges and the exciting things about social. These platforms change on a daily basis.
You mentioned at the beginning that one of the things that you had to build was an infrastructure that could also measure and define what success looked like. So tell us, what are the key KPIs here that you settled on, and how are you measuring that success?
Sure. So, favorability and trust has been critical to this firm coming out of the financial crisis with, all audiences of importance. So that is something that we have been measuring and will continue to measure. Employer of choice is really important to us as a firm, as we try and maintain a really robust pipeline of talent. Ever since we've launched Marcus, we are trying to correlate the relationship of favorability towards Goldman Sachs and receptivity towards buying Marcus products, so that we can begin to tie a more causal relationship, if you will, to Marcus commercial opportunity and the master brand Goldman. So those are some of the things that we measure, and we measure them on an ongoing basis.
I want to signal everybody, if you have questions for Amanda, please raise your hand, and Lisa will get you in queue to ask them. Are there, how did all of this serve you when we hit the COVID crisis? How did you respond to it, and how did some of these tools work or maybe not work to your benefit in response to this?
So, that's a great question. And I have to say, after living through the financial crisis and really trying to figure it out and build up and it being difficult, a very difficult time, I think COVID has been very, very difficult. I think for us, though, because we had the infrastructure built, we had the content creation efforts ready to go, we were able to pivot our strategy so that anything that we put out there was timely and COVID related, right? So whether it was, what are we thinking, what are the firm's thoughts on the economic impact of COVID across a variety of industries, we were able to put that out there, and we thought that was valuable and helpful to the general public. We had begun to put out some of the conferences that we had done for clients. That was, very, very helpful. So COVID allowed us to, I think, find even more value in our content creation and deployment efforts, because we were now putting out, we had the machine built, and we were able to be nimble enough to be able to pivot quickly to put out real-time content that was relevant in the moment. So we put out an enormous amount of content on, what is happening from our perspective with regards to the economy. We were able to talk about the small business community. We were able to highlight and illuminate some of the issues that they were concerned about. We did all sorts of infographics and surveys and kind of help raise their voice to Washington so that there was a real crisp narrative of what some of the issues were. We thought that was helpful in the time of COVID. And I think, the last thing I'll say with regards to what we did during COVID is what happened is there was this real focus on how our large organizations making sure that their workforce is being taken care of, the health of their workforce, the safety of their workforce. And, we had something to say on that, like, how do you make sure that your workforce is resilient? What are we trying to do to take care of our workforce? And so we happily shared that across our platforms with the general public. So, from my perspective, hopefully, and we saw this in engagement rates, we were even more valuable to the general public with regards to the type of content that we were putting out there.
Let's see if we have any questions from our audience. Lisa?
Hi, actually, well, I first have a question for you, Amanda. First of all, I love your reel, and it sort of struck me. I know you mentioned LinkedIn is really one of your stronger social, but seeing that you're doing Snapchat and, you know, TikTok. And so it really seems like, and then the energy of that reel, it seems like you're taking a real push also towards the younger demographic. Is that part of what you're, you know, bringing yourself out, introducing yourself again is all about?
Sure. Great question. Always been a core audience of ours, right? Because, you know, again, we're always, you know, we are a talent-driven organization, and we want people to come here and be excited to work here. But we also wanted to demonstrate we understand what the modern media world looks like and how we need to engage and where folks are, you know, engaging with content. I mean, I think one of the most interesting things that, as I look back on the conversations, and some of them were quite interesting and colorful about when we were going to get on either Snapchat or Instagram. I remember talking to someone, I said, well, look, on Snapchat, you know, they've got this Discover platform and all of these different media companies. This is where kids are getting their information from all these different media companies, and the CNNs of the world and the New York Times of the world and the Economists, they're creating newsrooms to accommodate this type of content for Snapchat. We need to be there. And, you know, remember, we got on Snapchat, and I remember saying, now just remember, it's going to be a jolting experience. You know, for people, some of the folks here who had never been on Snapchat, it's going to be a jolting experience. But people were excited, they were energized, and it was, and I think hopefully what we were able to do is walk that fine line between inappropriate, not right for the brand, versus, wow, they're taking it in the right direction, in a fresh direction. Still Goldman, still feels like Goldman. And so, yeah, we were, that was a very specific move to try and continue to demonstrate innovation, modernity, and appeal to the younger audiences.
Yeah, no, it definitely came across really well. And even with the influencers that you're using, are you sort of splitting that as well, like having that older generation of influencers maybe that are going to be on the CNNs of the world, and then maybe there's going to be other influencers who can talk money and talk in the Snapchats or in Instagram stories or something like that? Are you sort of looking at it that way as well, having different levels of it?
Sure. So, you know, it's a wide audience for us, and with regards to kind of what, you know, influencers new and old. This was one part of our strategy, right? So another part of our strategy was we did some very, some terrific partnerships with some media companies, the New York Times, The Economist, Vox, where some of our more traditional audiences were. And we created these immersive content hubs with, whether we leveraged in the New York Times situation, we leveraged their, I mean, terrific data visualization folks, right? To try and begin to demonstrate what was the ripple effect and how did Goldman Sachs contribute to Main Street. And so we tried to have a presence, a meaningful presence, a valuable presence with some of what I would call where we knew our older influencers were going, right? Which is, you know, kind of the media titans of the last decade. We partnered with them as well.
Yeah, no, that's and I actually hogged you, so that's all the time because we're running a little on the late side. But thank you, Amanda. That's as I said, I think that was really, it's very apparent in that sizzle reel that you are looking in those different directions. So,
Amanda Rubin, Goldman Sachs, thank you so much for